Hey everyone, it's time for another edition of Beaver Banter.
Beaver Sports Talk lives here.
It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, Ian Rivers over there. Ian, we got another guest here joining the program. Why don't you welcome him back in?
Yeah, we got Jared Rubado of the Bemidji Pioneer joining us once again. Talked to Jared a couple times over the course of this season, and now we're going to do a little season recap of, honestly, one of the most, I don't even know what to call it. Like, obviously it's weird, up and down sports seasons I've ever seen out of any sports team that I've ever followed ever.
Yeah. That's a perfect place to start, right? Like how do you classify this Bemidji State season? Like I'm hesitant to call it a bad season because I really don't think it was, and I'm hesitant. I wouldn't call this a bad team either. I think it was a flawed team for sure, but talent-wise, the talent was there the whole way. Where it struggled, where the flaws came up was consistency, for sure. Big one. Ironically, they did find a lot of consistency in the wrong way in January, but consistency for sure. I'd say while the talent was there, it was there in parts. Certainly missed Kyle Loft and Eric Polkamp. Those two were the big ones. Because it wasn't just. I think like the odd man rush problem this season was more directly related to a Kyle Loft, and in turn, like Will Magnuson was playing banged up for a lot of this season. I think some of the offensive struggles could be put on, not having Kyle Loft and Eric Polkamp. You factor in Leighton Road, those are your top 3-point getters from a year ago. And while they did have some maybe surprises, like a Riley Funk, Issa Perek taking way bigger of a step than I think anybody thought. Jackson Panzer started to find his legs at the end of the season. Adam Flameng found another gear. Eric Martin found another gear. And these are all second half, like late February.
Noah Quinn,
perfect one. It's such a bizarre season, like you said, Ian, like really bizarre, because if you look at it on a month-by-month basis, you have like 6 different kinds of teams. Like you have teams that defend like the best Bemidji State defensive scenario you could ever imagine. Then you have the most snake-bitten offensive team for the entire month of January. Like even when it wasn't snake-bitten, it was just bad. Like it's hard to quantify, but like the games against Northern, they were out shooting them like 3-1 and they couldn't score. Then you have like the resiliency month of mostly February, right? Like where you get the wins against Tech, the series against Bowling Green, the dramatic last weekend where I don't think they put as much stock into that second game against Mankato as they did, the first one when home ice was still technically on the line. You go down 1-0 against Augustana and you win the series kind of stuff. You look at it in November and they're like, is this the best team in college hockey? Like they beat North Dakota, Mankato, Minnesota, St. Thomas, like some of the best wins of the season. And so just a bizarre month. You look at December and you're like, this team is the worst special teams unit ever, between power play goals and 6-on-5 goals, and bizarre. It doesn't make it's a season where, depending on what part of the season you look at, it doesn't make sense. And when you look at the season as a whole, you can't really call it a success, but I don't think you can call it a failure either. And but it's a telling season in a lot of ways, because I think it was proof that experience doesn't mask all the holes. It's while you bring back 18 players, you have to make sure that they fill in all the holes that were missing from before. And I'm sure they thought Carter Radcliffe was going to work out better. And on aggregate, right, you're going to replace Leighton Road with Riley Funk, Jackson Panzer, and Carter Radcliffe. And while they did that at stretches, right, because Funk got really hot for a while, Panzer played well at the end of the year. Radcliffe started the year on fire, right? Like, I mean, at times it looked like they were replacing Leighton Road on aggregate, but it didn't really work. And obviously Radcliffe signs pro at the start of the new year. You hope that you can AJ McCauley and Issa Parekh and Ryan Henderson and Luke Roloffs can collectively replace Polkamp and Loaf, but that was always going to be the biggest challenge, right? Like that on the surface, how do you replace that many points and that much ice time with guys that are just not at that level yet? Parekh could get there, Henderson can get there, Roloffs can get there, but it's just a lot to replace in such a short amount of time. And for goaltending, right? Like Matthias Scholl, outstanding at certain points this year. He'd be the first to tell you there were some moments this year that he wants back. I chatted with him when he signed pro with the Swamp Rabbits, Greenville Swamp Rabbits at the CHL, and he's like, yeah, like this was probably my worst year of college hockey. Like, not he didn't enjoy it, he loved it, he had a great time, he said, but he's like, there was times where he was just fighting it. And I think you saw that maybe at times in January and December a little bit, maybe a little bit in February. But when he was on, you get the games like North Dakota and Minnesota, even Duluth, right? Before he got pulled, like he was outstanding in that Duluth game. Augustana, that game 3. Without Matthias Scholl, Bemidji State, we would have been having this a week ago. So
I thought he played really well against Mankato in the Mason Cup semifinal. He just got left out to dry a couple of times by bad turnovers.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, that I think when fans go to look at like how to digest a loss like the one against Mankato, and then we'll just use this to transition into that semifinal game too. It's
Run
so
our
easy
podcast
to
for us.
Yeah, so, it's so easy for us to sit here and be like, why didn't they give Matthias Scholl any help? Why couldn't they just pop a couple in? Like, just get traffic in front of the net. Just get shots on goal. Just stop turning over the puck at your own blue line. Like, yeah, true, you should. In theory, it'd be easier to win a game if you don't do all those things or do some of those things. But also, Mankato is just a really, really good hockey team this year. And we saw it last year, right? Like, is Mankato talent-wise this far ahead of the CCHA? No. Like, Rhett Pitlick's unbelievable. Alex Tracy's unbelievable, but nobody in their right mind is taking Alex Tracy over, Jacob Fowler on BC or Trey Augustine on Michigan State. No. But you have a group of guys that are already on the upper end of a conference like the CCHA in terms of talent. And then you get the buy-in of what it means for a team like that to play to a system. And that's what we saw last year with Bemidji State. And we saw it again this year with Mankato. You can make the argument, we saw it last year with Michigan Tech as well, right? Like it's when you have the talent and the buy-in on top of it. And the buy-in isn't something you can almost consciously do. It's almost unconscious. It's like, oh, this is what it takes to play at this level. Let's just keep doing this. And when you get a team on a run where the second they stop doing it, their season's over, they know nothing else but to keep playing at that level. And we saw it against St. Thomas. I fully thought St. Thomas was going to win that game because they were playing on that same level too, but just with the desperation of it being the end of their season. And Mankato still won that game. You look at Mankato as a NCAA tournament team, how intriguing, right? I mean, there's a good chance they have one of the best players they might have the best player on the ice against Western Michigan. They might have the best 2 players on the ice. It depends on how much you like Alex Bump and how much you like Hampton Sakinski. Yeah. But Rhett Pitlick and Alex Tracy make a really good argument against both of them. And it's a team that's bought in, but they're playing against a team with a lot more talent, that's a lot more battle tested, that is also bought in. So yeah, like when I watched that Mankato Bemidji State game, in Mankato, I didn't see it so much as a team that wasn't playing to its identity for the first period. I mean, that was a brutal first period, but second and third periods, you can make the argument that when Bemidji State wasn't pushing for 3 goals, they were the better team in that game. And yeah, hang the banner, moral victory. Like, no, but I think part of that is when you have a team that's Mankato that can play to their strengths, and their strength is goaltending, transition offense, neutral zone, suffocation, cutting the ice in half, that was on full display. And when you have a Bemidji State team that is turnover prone, odd man rush prone, and struggles generating offensive chances beyond what's given to them, it was kind of a recipe for disaster. And I think we saw it on full effect. But, maybe a better first period. We're looking at going to Fargo this weekend, right? Like, that's as thin as the margin is in playoff hockey. And I think that kind of makes me a little bit more excited for next year, because while it is going to be a whole different looking team, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of the young cores should stick around. I think before the year, I was a little bit more cautious. A kid like Panzer would just transfer back to North Dakota. He decommitted from there. But with the CHL kids coming in, if you're North Dakota, do you want North Dakota with a new coach now?
Yeah, who knows what that's going to look like?
Right. No, I'd be a little surprised if it wasn't Dane Jackson. I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. So don't take.
Okay.
But Brad Schlossman wrote today that Dane Jackson's been the heir to Brad Berry for the past 10 seasons. So the job posting closes tomorrow night at 11:55 p.m.
Oh, that's right.
I think their interviews.
I have to put my application in quick.
Yeah. So.
What is your plan, by the way, for UND hockey? And if you were a head coach, what would be the first thing you would
dissolve the program?
I would not.
That would be it.
Good. That's a correct. You would turn the Ralph into like a Walmart or something like that.
Yes.
It's so tough because North Dakota, turning into Walmart, sure. Turning into a World Terror Museum. Sorry.
My boss is not going to like this. He's a UND grad and he listens to this every week.
How can we get Ian fired? What else can we get on here?
Yeah. But I think if I'm North Dakota, you can only look at it in a scenario of hypotheticals in this already hypothetical, but in the scenario, I'd probably hire. This is the most important recruiting cycle in the history of college hockey, with the CHL kids coming in. And so having some sort of continuity, I would hire Dane Jackson. He's a guy that's been waiting for this job. He's an alumni. He's been an assistant. He knows the program. It seems like a slam dunk, kind of no-brainer. But let's say he's off the table and they have to go hire someone outside of the house. My first call is Chris Mayotte at Colorado College. Mm-hmm. Revive the program with half the resources. They steal recruits from the other NCHC schools. Imagine what he could do with NDS or with not NDSU, UND's resources. So that'd be my first call. It would also make me laugh hysterically if they just poach Luke Strand off of Minnesota State. I thought about it. It'd be very funny. I think there would be a lot of people on Twitter having to walk a lot of stuff back very quickly. And I would very much enjoy seeing
as a neutral observer. Yeah, it'd be just very fun to watch Mankato burn for a little bit. Yeah.
Right. Hey, we only had to wait a year to get back on top. Hastings who? And then, Luke Strand leaves too, and he brings Alex Tracy with him. That'd be very funny.
Yeah.
Evan Murr, have fun in North Dakota. That's, I don't know, kind of makes me laugh. But yeah, so I don't know. That's, I guess, what I would do if I was North Dakota, but I have no idea. Glad I don't have to make the decision.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a lot of good points. I mean, I just we've talked over the last month, CJ and I, and we had Jack Hittinger on, and we brought up almost everything that you talked about and the inconsistency on offense. And you brought up the point of even when it was we didn't look terrible on offense, it still wasn't working. That second period, I tweeted out after that happened. It's just I've seen that so many times from this Bemidji team where they played really, really well in that second period, and it just didn't culminate in a goal. You brought up the Northern Michigan series. It happened when I was up there watching the Ferris State series that they got swept at home. They had a really good second period, but they only got one goal. And it was then, I think, maybe tied 2-2 or 1-1 going into the third period, instead of wow, you really, last year's team would have gotten 3 goals if they played that well in a period. And it just never culminated into good enough results in terms of goal scoring. And when they had such bad, rough first periods like they did on so many occasions this year, it put them in a hole, and it put a team that really wasn't capable of scoring high quantities of goals consistently in a hole more often than not. And I think that that's a huge, huge detractor from where this team ended up. And you also brought up we talked about this last week. I think that a lot of us just kind of overestimated how much losing those three players in particular offensively would mean, and Kyle Loaf defensively, like it was a little bit too much for this team to replicate. Like you said, we had it in stretches. You look at all of these players on this team and you're like, yeah, I like this player. I really do. But it just wasn't consistent enough. Even from the top point scorers, Kirkland Irie wasn't consistently, the best player on the team for the whole year. He kind of picked it up against Minnesota, and then he had a hot streak there. Riley Funk was really good, but even he kind of had a little bit of a lull towards the end of the season. Everybody kind of went through that. We talked about Flamang and Magnuson, were two players that we brought up when we last spoke, and then they both had really good, second halves, but we didn't see that from them in the first half. It was just like, every weekend you had three players that were going to play offensively like really well, but then the guys that you had last weekend that stepped up just kind of faded into the background again for another couple of weeks. And it made for a frustrating season. Cause that's the last thing, I guess, before I'll kind of throw it back to you, is just like, yeah, I think the preseason expectations, if you look at where this team finished, under 500, 7th in the CCHA, yes, they made the semifinal. That would probably still be disappointing based off of the expectations we had preseason. But if you look at where this team was at the end of January, and you told me that's how they finished the season, I'm over the moon, because at least we got, something there for the last month to feel like we had a chance. We were, like you said, a period away. We were only down 2 goals heading into the third period. That's possible. It's hockey. We could have been there. So it does. It depends entirely on when you look at this team to determine. Like November, we were over the moon, man. Football was cruising. We were beating Minnesota. We were beating North Dakota. We were beating Augustana. It didn't matter. We were doing everything we wanted to in November. And then the next couple of months, we're like, ooh, man, this might be a long spring. But
it's funny at what point in the season you look, you could go from this team conceivably could like upset their way to the Frozen Four again, or this team is not going to make the CCHA playoffs. And those happen 2 months apart. I think it's fair to say it's a disappointment. I personally wouldn't call it a disappointment, just because, again, for the third time in 4 years, this group was 1 game away from making the NCAA tournament. And I know it's it would be a Mickey Mouse scenario, right? Like I'm fully aware, but at the same time, it's still the fact of the situation, and you still have the unbelievable highs of this season. Like this team, there have been so many outstanding Bemidji State hockey teams, even in the D1 era, and none of them beat the Gophers in North Dakota the same year. Like that is bananas to me. And yes, North Dakota is down. They missed the tournament. They still brought in one of the most talented freshman classes in the history of college hockey. Like, did Max Swanson have the year people thought? No. Was Carter Wilkie the transfer people thought he was going to be? No. But was Sasha Boisvert much better than people thought he was going to be? 100%. So, we can nitpick at points of the season. I think it's fair to say you were, not you, but the Royal U was disappointed. I also think it's fair to say people were satisfied. I think any conclusion people draw on this season other than an overwhelming success or an overwhelming failure is completely in the cards. And that's kind of classic Bemidji State, but kind of what makes it fun, right? So.
Yeah. And, kind of going back to what Ian was talking about earlier, and I know you also mentioned this too, Jared, but when Ian was talking about the offense for Bemidji State throughout the season, I mean, like he said, there'd be stretches where it just was like, you would get like 2 shots on goal up here and you're like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And then there'd be times where it's like, oh, we're getting all these shots and just nothing's to show for them. And they're good quality looks. What do you pin that on? Do you just pin that on randomness? Do you pin that on unluckiness? Is it just the lack of talent? Is it like, hey, the process is good and like it's fluky? How would you kind of break down that kind of, for lack of a better term, unluckiness?
I'll give you the worst answer I could give, and that's like it's a combination of everything plus another thing, which is opposing goaltending and opposing defense. Here's something that I thought was interesting about the lack of offense. Like, let's look at like the second half, right? Like, not how many goals they score against St. Thomas in total? Was it 3, 4? On that road weekend, Hockey Day, Minnesota. I think they had 2 against Northern Michigan. They never scored more than 1 in a game against Minnesota State. They pounded Michigan Tech. Like Michigan Tech, there was 1 million goals for that series. Week after that, they come back home and play Bowling Green. And Colmore is a very, very good goalie. He's also a very good goalie that didn't play for like a month going into that series. You know, I think he may have gotten a game here or there, but that was Christian Stover's net. And Christian Stover was hurt. I think Christian Stover might have sat out like the week or two before as well. But again, it's a backup goalie. So when you look at the teams they were playing and the big numbers they put up in the second half, it was Michigan Tech with a freshman goalie who joined the team a month earlier. It's Bowling Green and a backup goalie, and the times they struggled. The Ferris State one is a little bit more inexplicable, but Northern Michigan, Ryan Ouellette was the best player on that team by a country mile. He was playing D3 hockey 4 years ago, and now he's playing pro hockey. Like, Ryan Ouellette was the real deal, and he showed it in that series. He won goaltender of the week that week. Obviously, Alex Tracy has had one of the best seasons in, probably Mankato history, right? Like I don't think he's going to win the Hobie, but would anybody be shocked? Like, would anybody be absolutely floored if there's already a historical precedent to give it to a Mankato goalie. So, and somebody said that Dryden McKay didn't even win Player of the Year in the CCHA that year, but I don't know. I'll go, that's not important.
No, because I don't think the CCHA was a thing, but
no, that was 2022.
Oh, was it really? Oh,
yeah. So that was the first year with the Mason Cup. So yeah, I mean, I think part of it is goaltending, right? Like you run into a hot goalie, but I think it also, and hot goalie is a little bit, liberal in this sense because it seemed like every team that Bemidji State played in the second half had a hot goalie or was Michigan Tech or Bowling Green without Christian Stover. But I think you also look, it's like, okay, we're running into a goalie that's giving us nothing. Bemidji State is the kind of team this year that started to grip the stick a little tighter, a lot faster than other teams. And then it would unravel from there. Like you go, okay, this goalie's not giving us anything. We need to do something different. And it has to happen now. And let's completely abandon our offensive systems for the sake of we need to score right now. And it's like, no, this team was at its best when it stuck to its systems. And I think you saw them leave systems more and a lot sooner when they were in the rut. But when they were playing to the systems and they were playing with confidence, committed to playing Beaver hockey, they stuck with it more. And I think they had more success. And we saw it against Augustana. We didn't see it in the third period in game one, but we saw it the next two nights. Even though offense wasn't coming in abundance, it was still coming more against Augustana than it was the weekend before against Minnesota State, with two relatively equal goalies. Kotai had an unbelievable year, and he was fantastic in that series, and they still beat him. And that's how they were beating teams last year, too. Granted, they had a little bit of help in the schedule last year. Like, you get Ferris in the first round. You played Ferris like 2 weeks before the playoffs. St. Thomas, a team that you always beat, and Minnesota State when you're on your roll and you need 1 point to win the McNaughton Cup. Like, that was kind of your role going into the playoffs. And yeah, there were good goaltenders along the way, but it was a team committed to playing in its systems. And I think when things aren't coming easier and you have to really battle your way out of just an all-time rut, that's when you start seeing the problems magnified just a little bit more, and they get to those problems and they get out of their systems a little bit quicker because there's a little bit more panic. The difference between desperation and panic is pretty fine. It's a fine line, but they didn't really toe it well a lot in the second half.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. That's the weird thing is, like, I have a video on my phone from that McNaughton Cup weekend of myself waving to Alex Tracy as the Beavers chased him on Friday night. And now a year later, it's like, all right, we scored 3 goals on this guy in 4 attempts this season, and that's, it's crazy how that works. I brought up probably a couple months ago at this point, kind of when we were still on the tail end of that slide, just how it seemed like to me offensively, we kind of lost our A or A plus players, and the B players took a step up to like B plus, and we needed them to go from B plus to A minus, or like it seemed like we had a lot of like great role players. And I still believe that that's true. Like there's still, like I said, a lot of players that I'm excited about for next year. Now, I don't know exactly when the portal opens or who's going to stay or go. You just never know on a year-to-year basis. But there's still, like, assuming that not everybody leaves and we have like a Northern Michigan situation, there's still going to be players on this roster that I'm excited about for next season. And, you know, maybe now with another year, you hope that they kind of jump up. And I think this was my biggest fear for the, you know, when you see all these guys come back, the fifth year forwards, especially, like that you're going to deny some of these younger players ice time. And then it was a, you know, up until the end of the season, it was a disaster for a long time. And it's like, well, shoot, you know, all these guys came back and now we've neglected, you know, progressing our young players and giving them ice time. And it's hard to say that because you don't, like, I'm not going to sit here and say that Jackson Judding can't come back for his fifth year after he just was like one of the main pieces on a, you know, championship run the year before, just because I'm scared that my young players are going to transfer away the next year because they're mad about ice time. But yeah, I'm still excited about the future because we saw, you know, Noah Quinn, he finally got his opportunity when even last year he was kind of the odd man out because that fourth line found their role and he stopped getting rotated in every other night. And now he was able to find his footing. And, you know, we've seen what we've seen from guys like Chiddington and, you know, Silvestri, even at the end of the season, had some good shifts and stuff. Maybe not points wise contributing as much, but I'm still excited about the future with this team. And part of that is honestly because I don't know how it gets like too much worse than what it got this year.
Yeah, I think it's really intriguing when you bring up like the younger players part, right? Because it's not just a Bemidji State problem. That's a problem everywhere. Everybody brought back fifth years, and
yeah,
it's limited roster spots for younger players to come in. I think if the CHL kids weren't coming in, I'd be a little bit more concerned about a mass exodus. But Bemidji State, if we use Bemidji State as an example, or if you'd like me to use St. Cloud as an example that doesn't hurt you, fine, I'll use St. Cloud. But let's say St. Cloud has a mass exodus. They can just replace them with aged out CHL kids. Like Eric Lang, the AIC coach, had he was talking about like the transfer portal showcase that AIC was doing because obviously they're moving to D2.
Yep.
And he said something really interesting. He's like, if AIC came to me right now and said, you can actually, we're going to keep the program, but you can't keep any of your players. You have to build a new roster from scratch. He said, I could build a roster of 26 players in 48 hours with how much talent is coming out of the CHL and how many aged out kids could end up coming to college hockey. It's an abundance of talent that I think a lot of coaches may not know what to do with. Like it's different recruiting. And when you have this giant infusion of players, it's almost like everybody kind of gets like their pick of the litter, you know, once the big dogs are taken, you know, once Gavin McKenna signs and, you know, obviously Gavin McKenna is not coming to the CCHA, much less, you know,
what
for good reason, right? Because it's either St. Thomas or Mankato, but
yeah,
they have the NIL collectives, but yeah, so it's really interesting, right? But like, let's use Reese Chiddington as an example, a kid that kind of got beat out for ice time, and he's a solid player. He's got a ton of experience. He played in like 25 plus games last year, every playoff game, part of that crucial fourth line that was so good last year. Big kid, plays with speed. I think he needs to pick up a little, you know, needs to get better at finishing his scoring chances. He was really good at that last year, kind of struggled with that a little bit this year.
Yeah.
Where would a player like that go right now? He's not going to go to a Big Ten school, you know, maybe as a walk-on, right? But if you're looking to get like in a similar situation where most likely a bottom six forward, but fighting for ice time, playing more regularly, you're trying to find a better situation. what school wants a kid with 2 years of eligibility that they can get out of a kid with 4? Like, that's the question. If I think the CHL this is a really advantageous year for a lot of schools to be ditching a lot of 5th-year kids and have a ton of roster turnover, because your future can very well be decided with a lot of CHL kids, or the trickle down of maybe kids that would have been committing out of the USHL, or maybe high level NAHL kids are now funneling into you where they were funneling into other programs. Like, it's really, really intriguing. Sure, there will likely be some kids that transfer where you're like, that's a little bit surprising. This sophomore that's played 30 career games is transferring. Where is he going to go? And it's maybe even more likely that he doesn't find a team to play on too. But I think my best guess is I think the CHL kids coming in is really going to create more balance in terms of the transfer portal. In terms of maybe the depth kids, you're still going to see the top end kids leave. Like, I'm not saying he's going in. I don't know, but like, if maybe a big school in the Big Ten was trying to poach a kid off Bemidji State, they'd look at an Issa Parekh because of how he quarterbacked a power play. And as the season went on, he gained a little bit more speed and he got a little bit more physical, and he was using his physicality. He became a smarter player, and he was doing that playing top pair minutes and quarterbacking the first unit power play. That's a little bit more enticing for, a bigger school to try and poach from. Like, hey, we'll give you some NIL money. And let me tell you, there is a bunch of NIL money going around now in college hockey. The NIL era will start this summer, and you guys will be shocked when you hear some of the numbers some of the big time schools are going to dish out. But so no, I don't know. The transfer portal will be really interesting. So much of it depends on which CHL kids go where. I almost wonder if there's going to be a little bit of a jousting match between, because there's a whole other domino in the CHL to fall. You have the kids who haven't aged out yet, who will look to try and leave the CHL early to come to college hockey. That hasn't really happened yet. Bemidji State has a commit from a non-age out kid, but they're going to wait until he ages out to come to Bemidji State, Braden Dubé. He's going to come in 26, 27, whereas Max Hildebrand, who's going to win goalie of the year at WHL, or at least he should, he'll come next year because he's aged out. But if Braden Dubé wanted to play for Bemidji State next year, that would be a really interesting scenario to kind of delve out, because who has the power? Is it Prince Albert? The Prince Albert Raiders, do they have the power? He's under contract with them. Does Braden Dubé have the power? Does Bemidji State have the power? It's a power grab, and not a whole lot of people right now have any definitive answers on who has the most power. I think it's widely believed that players and college programs will have more power because, one, it's the player. A lot of times it's the player's decision, but two, college programs are better funded, less games, better facilities. And I think when you get two institutions or two sides of the three-pronged argument all pushing for the same thing, more often than not, the colleges are going to weigh out. But we still don't know that yet. And I think I go back to when the ruling was kind of talked about, every one of the CHL leagues said when their contracts expire, they will be allowed to go to the NCAA. Well, half these kids already signed contracts. And so what if they want to leave early? Like, can they break their contract? Like, will this become a legal precedent? Like, we don't know. What's the legal precedent between going to college in the United States and a legal juncture with, the country of Canada? Like, there's so much to sort out here, and we don't know. But all of it impacts recruiting for next season, because most of the CHL kids that are going to commit are going to come and play next season. And once the dominoes start falling, it could have a massive implication on the transfer portal. But the dominoes have to start falling pretty soon, because the transfer portal is only going to be open for a couple months. And if your coach doesn't leave, you can't go into the portal after the portal date, or unless you're a grad transfer. So it's really, really, really interesting what's going to happen here in the next few weeks. And once the CHL seasons are wrapping up, so once they're officially done, is when we're going to see the dominoes really start to fall, and the big name CHL kids are going to start committing. But that's, who knows, right? I mean, I could be totally wrong. And if I'm totally wrong, a lot of people are totally wrong about this. And it's very much a possibility. So But how that impacts Bemidji State, I can't find many solutions where it impacts them in a negative way, because regardless, whether it's through the portal or through the CHL or through other decommitted kids in other North American leagues, there's going to be more talent to pull from. And so, yeah, if you have to replace a Noah Quinn or a Reese Chittington or maybe a Jake McLean, or let's say worst case scenario, you're replacing a Kirkland Irie or an Issa Parak. And again, let me be clear. I know absolutely nothing about who's going in the portal yet. I have not had any tips. The portal is not open until Sunday. But let's doomsday scenario, you lose a kid like that. They might be easier to replace this year than it was last year when you lost Lowe, Holtkamp, and Rode, because the talent you're going to pull from is a lot better.
Yep. Yeah, that's always going to make it easier. Like this whole CHL thing happened so much faster than I thought. Like, you listen to every podcast out there and everybody's like, well, we don't know if it's going to happen or when. And then once it did happen, it just like, it's already here. Like we are dealing with it instantaneously. Like I didn't really expect to see as many kids as we got. Like already you look at, the recruiting pipeline. Yeah. Like it's crazy. How much it's changed the landscape. And I agree. Like, yes, it's going to help bigger programs because of the fact that like a Gavin McKenna will go to a big school like a Boston University or something like that.
Michigan.
But more, it will still open up more, avenues. Like a guy like Rhett Pitlick, he probably doesn't leave Minnesota. Like, no, obviously it wasn't open for this year. Minnesota didn't poach somebody from the CHL, but like that's going to happen more often where a guy that's been waiting his turn at a school like Minnesota or Michigan State, even at this point, has been waiting in line. And then all of a sudden they add 2 top 6 transfers and last minute you get a guy that's trying to come back. Now I think Rhett was a 5th year. That's why he was able to leave as late.
He's
as
a grad
did, right?
transfer.
Yeah. So that's obviously such a different situation too, but it's going to help.
It's really interesting you bring that up because while that rule isn't going to change, like grad transfers can go in at any time. And so obviously like his dilemma was he wanted an NHL contract and he didn't get one from Montreal. And so he's like, screw it. I'm going to go back to college hockey and just be a UFA at the end of the year and sign. Hopefully I do enough to get an NHL contract. But the interesting part is that Mankato had room for him. Like 2 weeks before the season, they had a roster spot.
Yeah.
That might not be a thing for Mankato next year because of the house settlement. If they opt into the house settlement, their roster is capped at 26. And yeah, it impacts NIL and scholarships and all the fun stuff that comes with that. And without without them changing the roster limit rules, which fingers crossed they changed the roster limit rules because the people that made them have never watched a college hockey game before. But barring them changing the rules, they would have had to cut someone from their roster to add Rhett Pitlick. You look at Western Michigan. In July, they added Hampton and Grant Slukinski. They added a goalie and a forward a month before they reported to Western Michigan. Those 2 kids went into the portal a month after it closed. And, obviously when Grant Patolny leaves, every kid gets basically another waiver to go into the portal because when your coach leaves, you can go in. And because, obviously Grant Slukinski had been there for a couple of years. Hampton had not been there, but he signed the NIL or the NLI, so he had to officially transfer. But what team under the new house settlement rules, like say Western Michigan opts in, do they have space in July for a second or third line forward and another goalie? Like probably not. Like your roster's filled at that point.
Not if it stays at 26, certainly.
Right. So that's something to figure out. I haven't gotten an answer yet on if Bemidji State's opting in or not. So
I was going to ask you if you knew anything about that.
I haven't. I poked around it a little bit. I think they're still mulling it over. The deadline keeps getting pushed back too. I think there's also, and this is not related to Bemidji State at all, but this is through some other schools that are learning about the house settlement process. There's also a scenario where you don't technically have to opt in or opt out. My understanding is if you give more than 18 scholarships, that means you automatically opt in. So if you give 18.1 scholarships, I think you're a school that automatically opts in. So I think in some respect, like they have to be a little bit more diligent. Every school has to be super diligent in compliance. And how many scholarships are you giving out? Is this, cleared by the NCAA? All of the stuff, right? And that's not just for hockey. That is for every single sport, because every single sport has roster limitations. Now, for football, it's like 80 dudes.
Yeah.
You only play 11 on the field. So 26-6 is a little bit more of a discrepancy for hockey. So, there's some other sports I know that are throwing their arms in the air about the roster limits. Again, they're sports that the committee never once bothered to look at and get insight as to whether it was a good idea or not. But I'm not going to spend the last 20 minutes of this dragging the NCAA. That'll happen naturally. I think it's really interesting what the House settlement will do, though, because recruiting will change regardless with CHL and with the end of fifth years in the portal, right? Like how NIL will change recruiting, but the House settlement will also change recruiting because there's a lot less flexibility for coaches. And I think for a school like Bemidji State, you might see them take less flyers on kids because they need more guarantees. And maybe there are more guarantees coming from the CHL or from the USHL trickle down, or, you don't know. And it's, my gut tells me there's going to be a little bit of trial and error in this process involved too. And, but one thing I'd be remiss if I didn't say it, and this isn't me like, banging out for the BSU hockey program, but I think Tom Serratori deserves a lot of credit for being a 60-year-old man who went in head first into CHL recruiting, because 2 days after that rules change announced, they signed the WHL goalie of the year. Did they know he was going to be goalie of the year at the time? No, but his numbers were ridiculous, and they've gotten even more ridiculous since. And I think, Bemidji State already had a pretty solid recruiting class in terms of numbers. It was full, and we've seen some kids decommit. Yep. But I think Tom knows what he needs, and he went out and he got a Matthias Scholl replacement. He got another right shot defenseman. He got a point per game forward. That's, hopefully you can peg as like, hey, this is where we found another goal scorer. Because if we're looking at another hole where they missed in the roster, Leighton Road was the goal scorer, and they didn't have one. Like, Jackson Judding is an unbelievable player. He impacts the game in more ways than probably even I can see, or all three of us can see at the same time.
Yeah.
But he's not a goal scorer. And that's what Bemidji State missed this year. Leighton Road was a goal scorer. So they got one in Brady Burney. At least they hope. He's a little undersized. Max Domestikov, another goal scorer, but a little bit more of a play driver. I think probably the best definition for him would be a two-way forward or a playmaking forward. He does have some experience playing D, but these are on paper, and granted, we won't find out until the fall, but on paper, these are home run portal or the CHL pickups on top of some really promising recruits that you already had coming in. And, it'll be interesting to see if Bemidji State opts out. I know Tom Serratori is someone who likes options. I'm sure Amber Fricklin would love to have options. He didn't get a ton, when she was the associate head coach last year, when they had 6 total defensemen on the roster. I'm sure she'd like to pull from either 8 or 9 next season. So it's interesting. I'm hoping to, kind of nail this down here in the next few weeks, but they don't have to say anything. And I don't understand I can't fathom why you want to keep the cards close to the vest on this, because there is some positive pub if you're opting in, but I guess there's maybe some negative pub if you're not opting in. And there's a lot
and from what I understand too, it's not a permanent thing. If you opt in, it's not like you're signing a 5-year contract to opt in. I'm pretty sure you can back out after 1 year.
Yeah, I don't know. The thing is, like, if you opt in and out, you're essentially changing your recruiting strategy.
That's true. Yep.
Because now you can start taking flyers on, like, hey, we got our 26. We can afford to bring on 2 or 3 more kids here. Let's take a flyer on this null kid who's got 80 points in 40 games playing in the middle of Amarillo. Sure, let's try it. Like, maybe he's not a home run, but maybe he is, like, that's
right.
So I don't know. In terms of like roster projection for next year, right? Like a lot of kids are gonna graduate, right? We've already seen that. Scholl's gone, Fulmer's gone, Jutting's gone, Visenen's gone. The one interesting one is Austin Jopi. He has another year. He can play a 6th season. I'm sure they would. That one to me is like, does the house settlement, like if they opt in, is that a spot? But the coaching staff loves him. The guys in the room love him. He was a captain this year, voted on by the team. Good penalty killer. I think they need a little bit more out of him offensively. But if you don't opt in, like that's a great guy to keep around. He's a 6th-year guy. He's gonna be 25 years old playing college hockey. But how many teams are gonna throw a 25-year-old meat grinder out there in a corner, right? Like that's what Austin Jopi is, and that's what he's good at. And so we'll see. It'll be really intriguing, and a lot of it comes down to the house settlement and where Bemidji State wants to land on that. But we'll find out.
Well, and you brought up Amber Frickland earlier. I want to leave us a little bit of time here at the end of the episode to talk women's hockey because you obviously covered them extensively as well. And me and CJ talked about it. I think that it was not a drastic jump forward in year one. It was, I think, one extra win on top of last season's overall total. But you could see, we looked at the goal differential of the season, and it was much, much better than the disaster that it was last season, especially, at the end of the year before. Yeah, and the year before. Like, at the end of the season, the series against Wisconsin, the eventual national champs, didn't go so well. But, like, overall, I thought it was personally a really good first year for Amber Frickland. I have not been following the recruiting as closely. The transfer portal I know just opened, I believe, this last weekend. Tell us what you know about it. Talk to us if you want about last season and what you see in the future.
Yeah, I see a lot of the same things you did, right? Like on paper, when you look at the record, 1 win improvement, same old Beavers. I would vehemently disagree with anybody who says that because structurally, oh my God, what an improvement from a year ago. I mean, a year ago, it was Yava Filipova getting 50 shots a game and hopefully they can lose by like 3-0 instead of 7-0. Like that's what it felt like. But there wasn't a time where they went into a game against the Gophers this year where I was like, this is going to be a blowout. Like it felt like every time. Now, Wisconsin and Ohio State were different. Those still felt like keep it manageable. Let's find some salvageable parts against one of the greatest women's hockey teams ever assembled. Ohio State, right? Obviously, they're not the Ohio State of last year, but they're still Ohio State. Like
they made the national championship game.
Then they were 18 seconds away from winning that national championship game. And by the way, what an incredible game that was. I'm so glad I watched that yesterday. It's for women's hockey. I think it's the same as a lot of programs at BSU where if it's a true rebuild into a competitive standing in their conference, it's going to take a lot of time. The steps forward are going to be baby steps, and the steps back, hopefully they're baby steps too. I think the most encouraging part was last year they went through a coaching change and they didn't lose a ton out of the portal. Like they kept Haley Armstrong, they kept Riley Reeves. This year, obviously Riley Reeves went in the portal, but they kept Morgan Smith. She hasn't gone in yet. Hopefully this doesn't change by the time this is posted. I know nothing, but that would be very Bemidji State for that to happen. But Haley Armstrong's still sticking around. Izzy Fairchild sticking around. Kaylin Gross is sticking around. Like the young core of this team, for the most part, is committed to sticking around, at least from what we've seen out of the portal so far. And look, do I think the peak of Bemidji State women's hockey is winning a national championship? No. It's an NSIC school and a relatively downtrodden one financially, competing against Big Ten schools. Like they're not on the same financial playing field. It's not even close. But in terms of where can Bemidji State go and what can their immediate peak be, I think they could rise up to 7th or 6th next year because they bring so many girls back. The recruiting class, right? It's a little tough to figure out just because it's a little bit of the same of what we've seen before where they they got a Minnetonka goalie. They got a defenseman out of, I think, Benil, the defenseman out of, Hill Murray, defenseman out of Warroad. I think one of the Hill Murray or Benil girls might be a forward, but
no, they're both defensemen.
Both defensemen. There's a forward somewhere else in Minnesota. They got a few Canadian
Minnetonka.
forwards. There it is. So
Leaper.
Senja Leaper. Correct. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, how the recruits are going to do, who knows, right? Like, did anybody think Morgan Smith would have the freshman year she did? Probably
Absolutely.
not. Like, she was outstanding. I think maybe Ian Rivers called it, not Ian Smith. Ian Rivers called it, but
I did not.
Okay, well, lying on a podcast.
I've never done that before.
Misinformation on
I've
the
never
internet.
done
What are
that
you doing?
before.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody thought, maybe the Warall girls were not as potent this year as they were last year, as they had solid freshman seasons on a tough team, but they didn't take the step forward that they thought. So maybe Kate Johnson got so much better as the year went on. Like, she picked up the speed of hockey, WCHA hockey second half of the year. Yava Filipova, when she came back, she was so good. And then season-ending injury, lower body, something on her leg. I think it might have torn her ACL, but not 100% on that. Caitlin Gross, right? Like, she was great. But so, yeah, can they make the jump into maybe getting a home playoff series next year? I don't totally see it right now, but could they be 7th or 6th and not have to go to LeBon next year? Yeah, I think they could. And the most encouraging part of that is they have the right coach. Like, Amber Fricklin is the right coach, and she loves Bemidji State. Obviously, it helps that she played here, and she's maybe the greatest women's hockey player to ever come out of Bemidji State, but she is a damn good coach too, and those players love her. So, yeah, I think it's exciting. It's like a tempered excitement almost, because like you watch Wisconsin and Ohio State play yesterday and you'd be like, wow, they still have to play 8 games against them, and then probably 3 more or 2 more in the playoffs. But it's a slow rebuild, but I think there's a lane for them to become like a Mankato or a St. Cloud, where they're fighting with Duluth, they're fighting with the Gophers for a home playoff series. And I don't know how far away we are from it, but this felt like a step in the right direction this year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Jared, anything else that you want to get off on your chest? On our ticking clock here, we have under 8 minutes to go before this thing is going to stop our recording in an hour. But what else BSU men's and women's hockey related do you want to get off your chest?
I don't know. I think we got to everything. Yeah, just, again, like a bizarre year, right? Like a really, really bizarre year at the Sanford Center and in the surrounding area. But I think I'll just remember the season for the highs were so high. Like, Hockey Day weekend was a lot of fun for women's hockey, right? Like, that field trip game was so cool. And they got to play in Hockey Day. Mm-hmm. They were competitive in all the games. Men's hockey that weekend, there was a fun series against St. Thomas, at least fun for me to be at. But the lows, man, the lows were low. And they were tough walks from the press box to the media room, where you're sitting there being like, I don't know what to ask Tom Serratori after the 9th straight loss at home, and they look like the exact same team every time. But I think for me, the saddest part about this year was watching it end for guys like Matthias Scholl and Jackson Judding, Tony Fulmer, another one, Will Magnuson, guys that when they have to put their head on the pillow, they were 1 game away from the NCAA tournament 3 times. And that sucks. It sucks. And it's the way it goes. It happens for athletes all across, but it's a tough realization, but great guys. And same with the women's program, like the seniors on there, great people. McKenna Deering, Kendra Fortin, Josie Bothan in the limited time we got. She was an outstanding interview. Meredith Killian, right? Like, these were Shelby Bryland. I never got it right. Apologies, but fun groups of kids, like just really the right kind of kids you want. And it doesn't matter for most people, right? But from a media perspective, to have the luxury of having kids like that come through the media room, it's truly a treat. And it sucks to know that, people like that had to kind of suffer that fate of getting so close so many times and never really getting there. But no, I mean, it's a dream come true that I get to do this every time. And I'm looking forward to the junior season on the beat next year.
What are you doing in the spring? Are you doing anything kind of Bemidji State related, or are you going back to the prep? Kind of what keeps you busy non-hockey season?
Transfer portal stuff will really start to pick up on Sunday. We'll kind of turn into a no life next week and just dive into the portal. And I don't love the idea of breaking news. Like, it's never really enticed me, but it's an easy way to pick up some page views is if you just hound the computer and dig up portal stuff and post on the site.
Just keep hitting refresh and
basically, yeah. We'll do some portal stuff. We'll do some recruiting stuff. We got a big project I'm doing this summer about Tom Serratori. I'm not going to say any more, but I'm very, very, very looking forward to it. If you guys haven't yet, please go read my story about the game in Mankato from 3 years ago. It's the hardest I've ever worked on a story.
I was gonna plug that if you didn't before you got out of here. I wanted to give you credit for that because I tweeted it like myself. Like the only thing that sucked about that was living it over again. And like, man, that goes down as one of the greatest like hockey stories of all time. It already does, but like imagine if Bemidji State like won it after like the game got called back on. Like it would have just been absolute fairy tale stuff. But that was an amazing. Oh yeah. Northeastern would have been. It was Northeastern, right?
Northeastern, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so convinced they would have filed a lawsuit with either the CHA or the NCAA.
Yeah, but no, that was a phenomenal piece. Like one of the best reads. Like I was pissed off because I know that I would never ever be able to write something that good. Like if I tried like putting that much effort into it. So
thank you.
Yes, if you haven't read it, go and read that.
How that came together was kind of a stroke of luck, maybe some would call it, but Brad Schlossman, who covers if you're listening to this, you know who he is, but he covers North Dakota.
Yep.
Best college hockey writer on the planet. He's been a pretty big mentor to me since I've gotten to Bemidji. And after Bemidji beat Augie, I sent him my story. I said, pick this apart. Tell me everything that's wrong with it so I can do it better the next time. And he texted me. I had a typo. I accidentally only put one N in Noah Quinn's name. And he texted me back. He's like, hey, just heads up, you got a typo there. So I pulled over on the side of the interstate in South Dakota, and I fixed it in my car. And I texted him back. I was like, just pull over to fix it. And he's like, Jesus, man, I could have just fixed it for you. Like, and he's like, are you busy? Like, I can call you if you want to pick through the story. And so he sat on the phone with me from 11:30 until 2:30 in the morning that night. And he is the absolute best. And we picked through every possible angle of that story. It took about an hour. The rest was just other, BSing about whatever. But we picked through that every conceivable angle. And so I got home at about 3:30 in the morning. I scheduled out 8 emails to SIDs because I didn't want it to look like I sent them at 3:30 in the morning. Woke up at 8 a.m. and immediately got to work on that story. And really cool. And I'm sure we're going to see some people in that story in my project this summer about Serratori. And awesome. Brad Belisle is awesome, by the way. I loved talking to him. He was a gem. So I'm a little upset we didn't get to cover, but we're running out of time, so I'll let CJ wrap this up.
Yeah, no, Jared, appreciate everything that you do coming on the podcast and just dumping all this great information on us because you get to be around there every day. You're connected with all the stuff. It's really great to have you on and have you talking. Go check out all of Jared's work at the Bemidji Pioneer. And it's just like Ian said, just a lot of great stuff to go check out if you're a college hockey fan. That's going to do it for us. Jared, until next time, this has been the Beaver